In this video we'll look at how to export a completed animation from Photoshop. We'll look at exporting as a GIF and also as a separate video file. So here I have my completed animation, and it's a simple walk cycle that's been animated on ones. And if I hit space you can see I'm playing it back here through all the frames. Now there's a couple of things to bear in mind, and firstly that this is a looping cycle, so I want to be cautious to make sure that I'm selecting the appropriate work area for this cycle. Now as I animated this walk, what I did was I actually created the first contact position here on frame 1, and then I repeated that again here at the end of the cycle while I was doing my onion skinning over at frame 25. And if I were to keep both of those contact positions in place, then I'd get a pause or a sort of a stutter in the walk, and that would be sort of undesirable. So I've lowered my work area down so that it excludes that frame, and that the last high point position is the end of the cycle, and so that loop should be fairly seamless. The next thing you want to bear in mind is which layers you want to actually keep in the final export. So I've got my layers color coded here, and right now I have my timing on, but if I wanted to, I could turn this off and also turn off my reference lines for that drawing. In this case I'm going to keep these on because I find these useful, especially when I'm coming back and looking at these sort of digital pencil tests, and I can see exactly how I animated this, and also as it plays back I get a good idea of the height with these lines included. But for a final presentation obviously I'd want to exclude those from the render. At this point then I'm ready to export, and I have a couple of different options here. Firstly I'm going to show you how you can export this as a video file, and you do this by making sure you have your timeline visible. If you don't, you can go to Window and then turn on Timeline. And in the options box at the top right hand corner you can just select that and go to Render Video. So if I select this here, we'll see the Render Video options come up here. Now first of all you want to make sure that you set your output folder here. In this case I'm just going to throw this on my desktop. And I'm going to set my name here, Walk Cycle 1s. And you can choose a subfolder if you want to, but I'm not going to in this case. And I'm going to do Adobe Media Encoder. You have the option to do a Photoshop image sequence if you want, but I've never really had the need to do that at this point, so I'm going to use the media encoder, and it's going to render out a video. So for the format you've got a couple of options: QuickTime or H.264. I'm a fan of just doing a straight H.264, and that'll give me a nice MP4 container. You've got some presets that you can use here. Typically, if I'm uploading to YouTube I might use one of these settings. If you really just want to do a quick output for testing, you can do a quick high quality output. Because these are usually short animations, the file size isn't that much of an issue typically. Document size, I'd keep this at the default, what you've set your original document to, in this case 720p. And frame rate, I would leave that at the same as the actual document itself, 24 frames per second in this case. Field order is not an issue because this is progressive, it's frame by frame. There's no interlacing here. An aspect ratio, I'm going to leave this at 1 because it's square pixels for screen output on a computer. So at that point you can set your range, and I'm going to set mine to work area, which is what I looked at just now, not including that last frame. If you're confident that what you have is everything you need, then you can just select all frames, or you can even put in a range here if you want to. Render options, I wouldn't really worry about these unless you're using any transformation tools or any kind of special in-betweens that Photoshop allows you to do. So I'm going to leave this at the default. And then when I'm ready, I'm just going to click Render. And you don't get a whole lot of options showing you that it's finished, but when that dialog disappears, you typically realize that it's actually finished. So let's take a look at the final output. If I minimize Photoshop then, you can see that I've got the file on my desktop, Walk Cycle 1s, and if we look at the properties of this, we can see that it's really a pretty tiny file, about half a meg. And I can play this back, and there's my animation. Now that's the drawback with a video format in this case. You can see that it's not actually looping by default, especially in the Windows Media Player. So I can only play it back and then watch it to there. Certain video players allow you to turn on looping like Windows Media Player, but some don't handle the loop very nicely, and you can see how you get that stutter that wasn't actually there in the original Photoshop file. So that's kind of the downfall of a video sequence. You have to kind of take that into consideration when you're watching the loop. It's not a true loop. So that's where exporting as an animated GIF can be an advantage here, especially when you're doing a pencil test of a loop, or if you want to export this out for use on the web. Let's look at that next. Back in Photoshop then, we've got our animation open again, and so this time instead of using the timeline option and rendering to video, I'm just going to go to File, and I'm going to go down to Save for Web. And if I do this, then I'll get some options show up here, and we have a few different things we can do. We can actually select all of the different presets to output this as an animated file. In particular, I want to make sure that I've got this set to GIF. This is going to give me my animated sequence. You've got some presets that you can use up here, but I'm going to leave those off for now. And I'm just going to make sure that I've set all of these up to my liking. So we've got selective. This is all to do with how the GIF file handles the color palette. You can see that we've got a table here, and that the file format is actually trying to select the appropriate colors that have been used, and it's optimizing that file. This is sort of an older, traditional way of reducing file size for web, but unfortunately that's the downfall of a GIF, is that you're limited to a maximum of 256 colors for this format. So I'm going to leave this at that maximum and keep this at diffusion. This is how it decides to make it look as though there are more colors in the file than there really are, by dithering lots of different colors together in sort of patterns. So transparency is not needed because I don't have any of that on this file, so you can deselect that. Matte I wouldn't worry about. The same with all of these formats options here. I wouldn't be too concerned with those. I'll leave these at the default also, and I can preview my color table, and you can even go to some options here, but I'm going to leave these at the defaults. I'm not too concerned at this point. So this is where I'm looking at the image size, and this is fairly important. We've got a few options here. You can imagine that this is a larger file, especially a larger GIF file, so you want this to be sort of optimized for your output. In this case it's a pencil test, so I really want to just leave it as is. But if I were optimizing this for a web page, for example, what I would be inclined to do is lower the resolution down. Let's start with the width. Let's do 640, and you can see how it adjusts the height accordingly, and that's actually taking it down to 50%. I get a new preview and I get a new color table. You can also see that we get these little options down here in the bottom left hand corner that sort of give you an estimated file size and how long that would take to download on a given connection speed. So we can see that we're looking at this at 100%, and we can see that the method used to downsize this has been by cubic, and you can set those accordingly. In this case though, I'm going to leave this at the original file size. So I'm going to put this back up to 1280 by 720, 100%, and bring this back up to my preview area. Now the way animated GIF files work is you can set how they loop. And I've got this set to forever. You want to make sure that you don't have this set on once, otherwise you have to keep reloading it, and it sort of defeats the object of using the GIF format. So set this to forever, and you can see how many frames you have, and you can actually do a test preview by clicking on the play button here. And you can see that we've got this endless walk cycle looping, which is exactly what we want. At this point then, I'm ready to actually save this out. You could do a preview here if you wanted to, but I'm just going to click on Save, and I'll put this on my desktop again, walk cycle ones, and save that as a GIF. And if we come back to our desktop, we can see that we've got that GIF file here, and if we look at the file size, it's actually roughly the same size, in fact a little bigger than the video file. So not much difference there really. How do we preview this back then? If we just double click it, then typically, at least as the case for Windows, you just get a static image of the first frame of that GIF using the Windows Photo Viewer, and obviously that's no good for us. So what I would actually recommend you do in order to test these back is load them up inside your browser. So I've got Internet Explorer here, and all I'm going to do is just drag this file over into Internet Explorer, and this knows how to translate that file and play it back as an endless loop. Remember, GIF files originally were heavily used on the web, so it makes sense that you could preview this accurately inside a web browser. So this gives you a nice endless loop. It's seamless, and in my personal opinion, it's actually a preferred method for viewing a loop such as a walk cycle like we have here. So that's how you can export from Photoshop as both a video file and an animated GIF. Thanks for watching.